Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Саламатсыздар, урматтуу катышуучулар. Бүгүн биз эл аралык байкоочулар миссиясынын пресс-конференциясын өткөрүп жатабыз. Бүгүн келе алганыңар үчүн чоң рахмат. Онлайн келгендер үчүн дагы ыраазыбыз. Бул жерде подиумда бизде AKIpress PA, ОБСЕнин парламенттик ассамблеясы жана ЕКУнун диалог боюнча жетекчиси отурушат. Мен азыр Клауд Хагенге ЕКУнун кыска мөөнөттүү байкоочуларын жетектеген адамга берейин. Катя, рахмат. Урматтуу коллегалар, урматтуу ЖМК өкүлдөрү, айымдар, мырзалар. Бүгүнкү пресс-конференцияга келгениңер үчүн чоң рахмат. Биринчиден мен Кыргызстандын элине жылуу кабыл алганы үчүн, меймандостугу үчүн, бизди ушул шайлоого чакыргандыгы үчүн чоң ыраазычылык билдиргим келип кетет. Менин атым Клод Хаген. Мен Люксембургдун парламентинин өкүлүмүн. Бүгүн Катя айткандай, мен атайын координатордун кызматын аткарып жатам. Ушул мөөнөтүнөн эрте дайындалган шайлоого. Ошондой эле мен өзүмдүн ыраазычылыгымды Тамаш Мезеричке, ЕКУ диалог миссиясынын жетекчисине билдиргим келет. Ал абдан жогорку квалификациялуу кесипкөй командасы менен келген. Ошондой эле Тамаш Стаматис, Европа кеңешинин парламенттик ассамблеясынын жетекчиси, жана менин коллегам Моника Сайковага ыраазычылык билдирем. Биздин эл аралык шайлоого байкоо
a comprehensive undertaking. The high number of international observers present on occasion for these elections testifies to the strong support of international community to Kyrgyzstan and its people. Indeed, our joint mission was composed of 365 observers deployed throughout the country on election day, including 18 observers from PACE and 72 observers from the OSCE PA. I would like to thank everyone who was present on the ground observing these important elections, both yesterday, but also those who have been conducting a long-term and qualitative monitoring since the start of the election process. We will now present to you the main conclusions and findings of our joint international election observation mission. Our complete statement will be available to you very shortly. The November 30 early parliamentary elections were administered efficiently, but there is strict campaign environment. Okay, but the government differ engagement. Fundamental and peaceful assembly these changes to the legal framework introduced a new majoritarian electoral system and new constituency delineation, as well as additional restrictions on candidate eligibility, resulting in significantly diminished political party involvement. Positively, the new system provides for 30 mandates, one per district, reserved for the underrepresented gender, and 41% of the candidates were women. The election administration enjoyed confidence in its technical capacity and introduced measures to enhance transparency of its decision-making. But for other key aspects of the process, transparency was insufficient, in particular on the new voting technologies, combined finance, and its decisions on election-related cases. The nationwide new remote voting option provided greater opportunities for voter participation. While there were competitive combined activities in some districts, significant financial disparities between candidates affected their ability to compete on a level playing field. Numerous allegations of vote buying continued throughout the campaign. Media refrained from covering candidates in their news coverage or additional programs, citing strict interpretation of the requirements for equal coverage and liability for contempt, limiting voters' ability to make an informed choice. Founding limitations and recent legal amendments impacting civil society organizations have significantly restricted participation in public life and election observation. Election day was assessed overall positively. New voting technologies functioned reliably and voting procedures were largely followed. However, widespread issues were adherence to counting and tabulation process were observed. This is the overall picture. These elections were conducted under a fundamental reformed framework that was amended repeatedly throughout 2025, introducing changes to almost all core components of the process and falling short of a number of international standards. Such far-reaching reforms adopted shortly before election day and without addressing almost all previous recommendations created challenges for transparency, stability, and voters' ability to make fully informed choices. Notably, the shift to a majority single non-transferable vote system and the creation of 30 new three-member districts has attracted substantial attention from observers. This represents not only a technical reconfiguration of the electoral system, but a structural change that has real implications for how political competition is organized and how voters are represented. We will yet have to see how a parliament of the new composition will operate in practice and how these changes will ultimately affect the role and functioning of political parties in the country. Despite the challenging time frame and the scale of changes to the electoral framework, it should be highlighted that the Central Commission for Election and Referenda, the CEC, has managed the technical preparations with professionalism, enhanced transparency, and maintains the trust of the voters. We are concerned that the media landscape has narrowed significantly since the last parliamentary elections in 2021. The new media law introduces registrations requirements for online platforms, limits foreign ownerships, and prohibits freelance journalism. In the run-up to the elections, there have been prosecutions of journalists, closures of media outlets, which resulted in self-censorship among many media professionals during the electoral cycle. We hope that all stakeholders will recognize that the free and independent media is not only a fundamental right, but also a vital support to the democratic process and institutions, helping voters to make informed choices and strengthening public trust in elections. In the same vein, it is regrettable, due to the recent legislative changes and dire financial constraints, citizen observation of these elections has been very limited and affected civil society participation in public life. This further underlines the important role of international observers in supporting transparency and public confidence in the electoral process. Our strong presence here, with more than 350 parliamentary and ODIHR observers, testifies to our deep support for Kyrgyzstan's democratic path. Before concluding, let me emphasize that we have seen during our time here that the people of this country remain engaged and interested in participating in the democratic development of their country. On our side, we stand ready to continue to work closely with the incoming parliament, as well as with all the political forces and stakeholders for the best interests of the people of Kyrgyzstan. I will now hand over the floor to my colleagues for them to convey their important contributions and to complete the picture of our joint observation exercise. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We now move on to Georgios Stamatis, who heads the PACE delegation.
Thank you, Katya. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is George Stamatis, and I had the honor and pleasure to lead the election observation delegation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, better known as PACE. I am a Greek parliamentarian, and of course I came from Greece. And please let me start with thanking my colleagues from the International Election Observation Mission, Claudia Haugen and Monica Zaikova. We are very quickly found common ground in our discussions, of course, and I can truly describe the outcome of our observation as the result of shared joint analysis and assessments right down to the last detail. And I would like to thank you for that. Of course, I owe a huge thanks to you, to Thomas, the head of OG mission. He and his team were the backbone of this endeavor, both logistically and in terms of content. And in an extremely short time and in an extremely professional manner, they laid the foundations for our presence here. Many thanks to Thomas and to his team. At the outset, I would like to explain the context why the delegation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe is present here in Kyrgyzstan. More than 10 years, the Kyrgyz Parliament became a partner of democracy of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. This was an important political decision and, of course, a clear expression of the country's desire to align itself more closely with European democratic standards and values. And of course, the values of the Council of Europe, the Parliamentary Assembly, is about human rights, democracy, and rule of law. And this decision entails commitments and expectations for the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe: free and fair elections from a fundamental principle, not only in relation to our own members, but also in relation to our partners. This is a very reason why a delegation of the Parliamentary Assembly is a part of this international election observation mission. For these parliamentary elections, the PACE delegation had members representing almost for all political groups. It was accompanied as usual by a representative of the Council of Europe, Venice Commission, and assisted by a staff from the Division on Election Observation of the PACE and from the Political Affairs Committee. Yesterday's vote provided us with a valuable picture of how the electoral process works on the ground. We saw dedicated polling staff, women by a large majority who work with professionalism through the day of the elections. We also saw voters participating peacefully and in an organized manner, showing their willingness to engage in the democratic process. They are positive signs and they matter, but we cannot ignore the fact that an election is shaped not only by what happened on elections day, but also by the broader electoral environment. And here we learn about issues that must be addressed to strengthen public confidence in the process. It is essential that the legal framework, the media landscape, and the condition for a political competition create a level playing field. Those are the standards that the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe expects from the partner of democracy. This also refers to the meaningful participation of youth and women in political life, and as well as people with disabilities. The authorities should strengthen their efforts to ensure that everybody can exercise their constitutional rights in the electoral process. Ladies and gentlemen, our observations yesterday form part of a longer and ongoing dialogue. As many of you know, in 2022, in the Parliamentary Assembly conducted a major review of Kyrgyzstan commitments under the Partner for Democracy status. While here had been areas of engagement, the report found only limited progress on several key commitments, including in relations to elections. The Assembly conclude that stronger efforts were needed to ensure that the commitments made in 2014 remain credible and meaningful. This election observation mission is therefore more than a technical exercise for the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. It is a crucial moment in assessing how Kyrgyzstan is living up to its commitments and in guiding of our dialogue for the years ahead. Our presence here was not only justified but extremely important for the future of relationships between the Kyrgyz Parliament and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Looking ahead, I will prepare a detailed report on this election observation. This report will be presented to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg in January next year. This report will serve not only as a record of our findings from this mission, but also as a major reference point in the ongoing review of Kyrgyzstan Partner for Democracy status. It will help share our further assessment and carve out the next steps to our cooperation. Please let me conclude by wishing to the new parliamentarian of Kyrgyzstan success. I'm looking forward to engage our cooperation as partners for democracy on the basis of shared principles, not only about the values, but to improve democratic governments. Once again, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We now move to Monika Zaykova, who heads the OSCE PA delegation.
Thank you. Dear media representatives, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. At the outset, I wish to express my sincere gratitude to my colleagues that are present here. Our joint effort demonstrates the importance of international cooperation in supporting transparent and fair elections. My name is Monika Zaykova, and I'm head of delegation from North Macedonia to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And I had the pleasure of serving as head of OSCE PA Observer Delegation for these important elections and to lead a delegation of 72 observers, which includes 54 members of the parliament plus staff coming from 34 OSCE countries. I thank all my parliamentarian colleagues for their important work. They did it yesterday. We observed voting throughout Kyrgyzstan in addition to Bishkek and its surroundings. We were also in around Karabalta, Sokuluk, Tokmok, Sholponata, Osh, and among other places. I also want to warmly thank all the people that I met yesterday in polling stations. Your dedication and hard work was key to delivering a smooth and successful election day. Further, I would like to express my appreciation to the Central Committee for Elections and Referenda for the timely and smooth processing of the registration and accreditation of our delegation. On behalf of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, I fully endorse the statement of preliminary findings and conclusions that we are presenting today. As highlighted by my colleagues earlier, these elections are taking place amid profound changes of the electoral framework. For the first time, these parliamentary elections have introduced remote voting nationwide. We welcome this important step, which expand access for voters and allow more people to participate in the democratic processes, even if they are away from their home electoral district. In addition, the new integrated voting technologies streamline the election day processes. They combine biometric voter identification, electronic ID verification, on-the-spot ballot printing, and electronic tabulation of preliminary results, demonstrating a commitment to modernizing the electoral process and making it more efficient and inclusive. A notable development in these early parliamentary elections is the effort to increase women's representation, in the Jogurku Kenesh, generally referred to as a women quota. Following recent constitutional amendments, out of the 3 top candidates elected in a district, 1 shall be a candidate of the underrepresented gender. To put this into context, in the previous convocation, only 20 women served in parliament out of the total 90 seats. Let me welcome this positive measure as a first step to strengthen women political participation. However, much more needs to be done to ensure a genuinely inclusive process for all underrepresented groups, including the national minorities. As observers, we will continue to assess whether these measures translate into meaningful participation and whether the parliamentary processes becomes more representative. An inclusive electoral process must go hand in hand with a vibrant civil society and unrestricted independent media environment, which are essential for state institutions and for engaging voters in meaningful ways. We hope that these conditions will gradually take root, and we stand ready to support efforts in this direction. It is our sincere hope that Kyrgyzstan will show the necessary political will and take actions to address our recommendations. For our part, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly stands ready to work with the authorities in Kyrgyzstan, particularly the parliament, to follow up on the observations we have made. In closing, I would like to emphasize once again that the large presence of international observers this week clearly demonstrates the global community's strong and ongoing commitment to supporting Kyrgyzstan on its democratic journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, we turn to Tamas Meseric, who heads ODIHR's election observation mission.
Thank you, Katja. Dear journalists, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your interest in the work of the Observer Mission to the early parliamentary elections in the Kyrgyz Republic. My name is Tamas Meseric, and I have the privilege of heading the Observer Mission from OSCE, Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. I'd like to begin by thanking the Kyrgyz authorities for the invitation to observe and for facilitating our work throughout. I would also like to thank, of course, our partners from the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and PACE for the excellent cooperation, which is a tradition by now. Before I go into our findings in more detail, I'd like to emphasize the fact that I and the ODIHR team of election experts have been in Kyrgyzstan since mid-October, and with 30 long-term observers arriving just a week later and spreading out across the country to observe. This has given us the opportunity to analyze the legal framework and to observe the run-up to the elections closely and comprehensively. First, rather than focusing on election day, which I will talk about later, I would therefore like to begin with some of our key findings from earlier in the observation mission. Some of it has already been mentioned by my colleagues, but they are worth repeating. 1, candidate registration. Among the many major changes to the election law this year were amendments that unduly restricted candidate eligibility. These were criticized at the time by ODIHR and other organizations as well. One example was the ban on citizens who no longer had a criminal record running in the elections. Another was the prohibition of anyone on a security services preventative list for suspected links to organized crime and terrorism. These and other limitations on candidacy go against international standards and previous recommendations made by ODIHR. 2, the campaign. I'd like to make 2 points here. First of all, the very strict regulations that prescribe what can and cannot be said during a campaign, both by candidates and voters. Together with the narrow interpretation of these rules by the election administration and an overly harsh sanctions for violations, this severely limited freedom of expression for candidates and lessened the engagements of voters in the process. In the course of our observation, ODIHR has observed campaign events around the country and spoken with many candidates and voters and has collected many examples of this situation, a number which you will find in our report. Secondly, still in the campaign, the ability to voice a political opinion and the availability of accurate and relevant information are vital for voters to make an informed choice on election day. This was not the case. To move forward, Kyrgyzstan needs to work on creating a more inclusive system, both for candidates and voters, which would help increase voter engagement and also public trust. 3, the media. A free and vibrant media that has already been mentioned by my colleagues, that is able to report on the political process is also vital for voters to make an informed choice on election day. Our media monitoring on the main state and private broadcasters has shown an almost complete lack of news coverage and analysis of any campaign or other events related to the elections. In addition, legal changes made over the last few years have made it easier to prosecute journalists and close independent media outlets, which has had a chilling effect on media freedom in the country. Taken together, the shortcomings in these 3 areas I have just mentioned undermine both the freedom of citizens to stand in elections and of voters to participate in the campaign and learn enough about candidates and what they stand for to make an informed choice on election day. Nevertheless, it was good to see that the elections were smooth yesterday and our observers positively assessed the work of the commissions during the voting process. In total, our collective 359 observers had 1,254 observations of the voting and observed the counting process in 118 polling stations. There were issues with the secrecy of the vote, however, and the presence and interference of unauthorized persons. Further, our observers reported that in the polling stations where we observed the count, there were widespread issues with adherence to procedures. New technologies were used nationwide yesterday, and our team found that there was general trust in these technologies, and polling staff were well prepared to use them. However, the key safeguards for the introduction of technology, such as a public procurement process, independent verification, and audits, are either not conducted or not transparent. Finally, I would like to stress that today is not the end of this election observation mission. In the coming weeks, we will be working on the final report that will contain recommendations to the authorities to improve the process for the future. This will be published some 2 months from now. Before I close, I would like to thank the team of experts working with me here in Bishkek for all their hard work, as well as the observers spread out across the country. My gratitude also goes to the local staff, without whom this observation mission would not have been possible. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, and thanks to you for your attention. And now there's time for your questions. I'd like to emphasize that while you're all very welcome here today, this is a press conference and we will only be taking questions from journalists. I'd therefore be grateful if you could begin by introducing yourself and your media outlet. We also have simultaneous interpretation if needed. Please go ahead.
Joanna Lillis, The Economist. Thank you for sharing your findings. I have a question for Mr. Hagen. You talked of significantly diminished political party involvement in this election. You talked of significantly diminished political party involvement in this election. I wonder if you could elaborate on why that might be, why that might have been caused by the electoral reform, and also what might be the impact on the democratic process of that diminished involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. If you compare the elections of 2021 to parliamentary elections in 2025, in 2021 you had 21 different political parties running for elections. In these elections, you only had one party running for elections, but you had about almost 500 candidates running for elections, which were registered, and a few 460, I believe, which were running afterwards for elections. So that means that for the understanding, my personal understanding as a parliamentarian, the influence of parties, of political parties, due to the new election law will decrease. And we will be confronted for these elections and that's only a general conclusion, that due to the 30 districts and due to the 3 members per district, which will be a parliamentarian, there were mainly no national analysis of the political future, economic future development for Kyrgyzstan. It was mainly, for me, regional programs, and regional programs are elaborated by candidates coming from that region, coming from that district. So it appears evident that the splitting between parties and personal candidates will increase in the future if we remain in that system. Or over the 30 districts, you have, it's also the role of the parties to have a global view of the country and not a view, interpretation, a political interpretation or destination of districts or of regions.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Please, the gentleman over there.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Alexander Thompson, Eurasia.net. The interim report said about 3% of the candidates were representatives of ethnic minorities. Do we know approximately how many of those representatives of ethnic minorities were elected, especially concerning the Uzbek minority in the south?
I will need to check the exact number, but the exact number is either 3 or 4. So it's a very small number. So we can safely say that this will be a parliamentary composition with the lowest number of self-identifying ethnic minority candidates. This is what we have so far.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the floor? If not, we'll check online. No, there are no questions that have come over online, so we will leave it there. The report and press release in all 3 language versions are available on your way out and have already been published on the ODIHR website. Thank you very much again for your interest. Good afternoon to you.